The Daily Derech. We are walking the path of holiness.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Derech, a special project of exploring Judaism, the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, the Rabbinical Assembly, and Temple of Aaron. Today is the first day after Shabbat Kodesh, the 19th of Av, 5786, corresponding in the secular calendar to Sunday, August 2nd, 2026. We will read Parashat Re'eh this coming Shabbat. Let's begin. Parsha. We'll start our first triennial aliyah of the Parsha of Re'eh today. We're going to be learning in this triennial cycle, this first year. This year, we'll be learning specifically chapters 11, verse 26 through 31. 26 through 31. Let's read those verses for you. See, this day I set before you blessing and curse. Blessing, if you obey the commandments of the eternal your God that I enjoin upon you this day, and curse, if you do not obey the commandments of the eternal your God, but turn away from the path that I enjoin upon you this day, and follow other gods, whom you have not experienced. When the eternal your God brings you into the land that you are about to enter and possess, you shall pronounce the blessing at Mount Gerizim, and the curse at Mount Eval. Both are on the other side of the Jordan, beyond the west road that is in the land of the Canaanites who dwell in the Arava, near Gilgal by the terebinths of Moreh. For you are about to cross the Jordan to enter and possess the land that the eternal your God is assigning to you, when you have occupied it and are settled in it. So this is a very famous line. It's funny, I've heard so many bar bat mitzvah drashot on this particular parsha. It's a very, very famous line. A lot of people's famous line. I place before you blessing and curse. This day you could choose which one. But I've always found it incredibly compelling, and I think it sort of, for me at least, unlocks a truth about being Jewish, something that's unique about being part of the Jewish people and the destiny of the Jewish people. And it's really unlocked for me in the commentary of Sforno on this particular verse. So this is Sforno's comment on just the first verse, on verse 26. So he says, Habita oresh lo ye enecha al oven beinoni, right? Look and see that there is no intermediary, right? We can't be in sort of any intermediate path, right? All there is, and that's the way it is with the rest of the nations of the world, right? They could sort of just be average. They could be just a normal nation of the world, right? Kiemnam, however, I give to you, place before you today, just blessing or curse. V'hem shnei katzvot, right? Katzavot. They're two extremes. Ki habracha hi hatzlacha yoter min hamaspik, right? Because blessing is success that is beyond what is just enough. Al tzad hayoter tov, on the best side that there could be. Ve'klala hi me'ira machseret shelo yusag hamaspik, right? And curse, on the other hand, is a curse, right? It's a horrible thing in which one lacks even the basics of what one requires. And the two of them are placed before you all, and you can choose which one you want to gain, and it's up to you to choose. So what is the Sforno saying here, right? What is Sforno saying here? He's saying, see, I've placed before you either blessing or curse, right? You can choose blessing or you can choose curse, but you can't choose in the middle, some blessing, some curse, right? You either get one or the other. And I think this for me at least, really plays into the Jewish people's unique destiny. I'm a very big Zionist, very lover of the land of Israel, the state of Israel. And one thing that was very relevant to Herzl in his Alt Neuland and sort of conception of what the state of Israel should be was a nation like any other nation, right? It should just be, just as the French have France and the English have the English, the Jews should have Israel, right? And it will elevate the Jewish people to the world stage and make them just like everybody else. And that was sort of a goal, a very early goal of political Zionism from the Herzl school. And and this is all, of course, to mitigate and defeat anti-Semitism. I've always struggled with this idea because from the outset, according to the Torah, the Jews are not supposed to be like every other nation. We have a unique covenant with Hashem, and this covenant was made with our ancestors 4,000 years ago on Mount Sinai, and it's not a covenant we can leave. It's not a covenant we can say, okay, it's done, now just make us just like everybody else. That's not possible. I wouldn't even say it's a good thing, but regardless, it's not possible. These are the terms of our existence as a nation. If we follow the covenant, we'll be blessed beyond our wildest imagination. We'll be an extremely special nation, which I think we've seen as Jews, that we have this ability to be really unique and really special. But we also have the possibility, when we abandon our tradition, when we abandon who we are, what makes us unique, and we sort of try to just be like everybody else and not follow our unique commandments and our unique covenant of the Torah, we never can do everybody else just like everybody else, right? We don't blend in well. Eventually, people kick us out of their society, push us away, and things end up being really terrible. We just don't do the things that other people do as well as they do them. Who Jews are supposed to be are people of the Torah, of our covenant, of our unique ethical tradition, and our unique religious theology. Again, that is quite unique. And the attraction as Jews is to try to just do what everyone else is doing and be like everybody else. But that never was supposed to be who we're supposed to be. And this is exactly the line that's saying it. As Jews, when we cling to our unique destiny, our unique way of life, our unique values, our unique Torah, our unique religious conception, our unique characteristics of how we should be, we can be better than any other thing. We can have so much more beyond our basic needs. We can be truly blessed in a very unique way. But when we abandon our tradition, when we abandon our faith, when we abandon the Torah and just try to seek the sort of the comforts of the outside world only and just seek to be happy with that, we never can have it just like everybody else. We'll fail and we'll be truly cursed and have way less than we even need in the end. So this, of course, is showing us how we must cling to, as a nation, to Jewish values, to the Torah, and also each one of us has to do our part in doing that. Halacha. We're going to now turn to the Mishnah Torah, and we're going to learn the fourth halacha of the third chapter. So we're going to be learning today about the Mincha prayer, and I think you might have heard me hint, if you were listening to yesterday's episode, about the little bit of complication around the end time of Mincha. Right. So far, we've covered the morning prayer, the morning Amidah. Right. We know that we can say that at the beginning of sunrise, and we have to finish having said it in the first 4 hours of the day after sunrise. And then we talked about Mincha, of that you can say it basically anytime after 30 minutes after midday, which would be Mincha Gedola, but optimally one should say it 9.5 hours into the day, which is Mincha Ketana, right? So if Mincha Gedola begins 6.5 hours into the day, Mincha Ketana begins 9.5 hours into the day, so in the later half of the afternoon. But the question is really, when does Mincha end? And this is where there's really a machloket over this. And this is what the Rambam says. Of course, he says it in his language that needs to be unpacked a little bit, but that's okay. He tries to make it simple, but it's not simple. He says, "Behold, you've learned that the time of Mincha Gedola is from 6.5 hours until 9.5 hours, and the time of Mincha Ketana is from 9.5 hours until there are 1.25 hours left in the day. One may, however, recite the afternoon service until sunset." Okay, so that's the halacha we're going to learn today, but I want to unpack it for you so you can understand it. He's trying to put a complicated debate of the rabbis into this simple halachic code, and so we need to unpack it a little bit to understand what's being said here. There are two opinions of the time in which we can say Mincha until. There is the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah, and there's the opinion of the sages. Rabbi Yehudah says that one can say Mincha starting at, obviously, Mincha Gedolah, Mincha Ketana. They both agree at the starting point, but they disagree about the ending point. So Rabbi Yehudah says that you can pray it until what's called plag mincha. Plag mincha. So what is plag mincha? Plag in Aramaic means half. So really chetzi mincha, chetzi of the time of mincha. And really the true ideal time of mincha is mincha ketana. Mincha ketana goes from 9.5 hours of the day till 12 hours into the day after sunrise, which is basically sunset, right? So remember, these 9.5 hours, 6.5 hours, 12 hours are all counted from sunrise. So if we subtract 12 from 9.5, right, we get 2.5. So really, there's really 2.5 hours for the ideal mincha period of mincha ketana. If we divide that in half, we get 1 hour and 15 minutes, 1 hour and a quarter. And that's why the Rambam says at the end of his, in the middle of his halacha here, until there are 1.25 hours left in the day. So if you subtract 1 hour and 15 minutes before sunrise, that's plag mincha. That is the time, at least according to Rabbi Yehudah, of when you can say mincha until. Okay? So it's an earlier time. But we see at the end of the Rambam here, it says, one may, however, recite the afternoon service until sunset. That's the opinion of the majority. That's the opinion of the sages. And the sages say that you can pray mincha all the way till sunset. Now, who is right? Right? Obviously, this is something we have to understand clearly. This is one of those unsolved machlokets in the Gemara. There is no this opinion is right, this opinion is wrong. Different. The Gemara itself says you can hold by any of these opinions, right? But so you can hold that either mincha ends at plag mincha or it ends at sunset. Now, most people would think that. Okay, well, why don't I say it ends at sunset? Because who doesn't want more time to pray mincha if I had a choice? Well, there's ramifications to that. And we haven't really learned as much about Ma'ariv times, but Ma'ariv, the time for praying it, is also somewhat up for debate as well, in that ideally, Ma'ariv should be prayed after Tzeit HaKochavim, after the stars come out in the sky. But for most people, for a lot of people, that's not a reality, especially if you live in northern climates. The reason is because then you can say the Shema with it and actually have fulfilled both mitzvot. Remember, the Shema needs to be said after the stars come out in the sky, and so if you say the Amidah before that of Ma'ariv, then usually you're praying the Shema with it. Then you actually have to say the Shema again after the stars come out. So ideally after the stars come out, but most people don't do that, can't do that, especially in the summertime. So the question is, when do you start praying Ma'ariv? Can you pray it after sunset, or can you even pray it after plag mincha? Well, if you follow Rabbi Yehudah's opinion that mincha ends at plag mincha, then you can pray Ma'ariv after plag mincha. Okay, why? Because you cannot have it be both Ma'ariv and mincha time at the same time, right? So if you follow Rabbi Yehudah's opinion, mincha ends at plag mincha, right, and then Ma'ariv begins after plag mincha starts. Right, but if you follow the sages' opinion, who say that mincha does not end till sunset, right, then during that period, then you cannot pray Ma'ariv until actually sunset starts, right? So there's a later time in which you can start Ma'ariv. So there's negatives sort of on each side of whether you're choosing. It's really a lifestyle decision of what you're going to choose, whether it's easier for you to pray if you want more time to pray mincha or you want more time to pray Ma'ariv. Often this is decided community by community because of when people can gather based on the latitude line that they are on, of when the sun sets and when people can gather together in a minyan and community, so that's not too late. But you can change the way you do this. But really the idea that comes from the sages that really you can't do both in the same day. Why not? Because you do both in the same day, right? Then you are praying in. Then there's technically a time for you that both mincha and Ma'ariv is acceptable, which is not okay. Each day, at the very least, you have to choose whether you're going to follow Rabbi Yehudah that day or the sages that day. And so that at least your davening schedule works out appropriately. And at least for our community, it's often I try to choose the one that makes sense, that people can come to daven together well. So very, very interesting, but it's another flexibility in your own life, and especially for those who live in places like Minnesota, right, far to the north, where evening in the sunset can be very, very late in the summer. Oftentimes we'll really choose to be plag mincha in the summer, and then oftentimes in the winter, I'll actually switch the sage's opinion and say it's at sunset, because again, then it's a little later when we can say mincha too. When mincha sometimes will end extremely early in the winter, otherwise. Again, very interesting point here, and one of these unsolved machlokets within the Talmud that reflects within the Gemara as well. Musar. We're on Shaarei Teshuvah, chapter 1, section 11 here, and we'll continue going on discussing the foundations of Teshuvah. So we already discussed that the first principle is regret, and now we're going to talk about the second principle of Teshuvah according to Rabbi Yehudah, which is leaving the transgression. He begins. The second principle is leaving the sin, that he should leave his evil ways and decide with all of his heart that he will not continue to return this way again. And if he did evil, he shall not do it anymore. Okay? So again, he's just defining it very simply, right? That one should leave the evil ways and decide with all his heart that he should not continue to return this way again. Now, interestingly, what this is it's not necessarily not doing the sin only, but it's leaving the sin, right? Actually leaving it behind, leaving one's evil ways and deciding in one's heart. It's really something that happens in one's heart, not necessarily in one's actions, right? Here, what he's saying is that, actually, no, I'm going to change that. There certainly is an active component of leaving one's evil ways, but there's also a hard component of deciding with all one's heart that it's not going to happen ever again. So obviously, repentance needs to involve the idea that you're leaving the transgression behind and you're not going to do the sin again. But it also needs to be with the heart as well, that you're going to say that I'm not going to return this path again and make a resolution in one's heart to not do so. And so he kind of describes it more here. And if he did evil, he shall not do it anymore, like the matter that is stated in Ezekiel 33:11, return from your evil ways. That's number one. And likewise stated, let the wicked give up his ways. But know that in the case of one who sins by happenstance, because he had a desire and his impulse overpowered him and attacked him, whereas his ideas and senses did not rescue him when he encountered it. So what he's talking about here is a case where you've really decided to give up your evil ways in your heart, but your gates of hara, your evil impulses, your selfish impulses sort of took you over at the moment of transgression, and you weren't able to succeed in overcoming them. That's what he's talking about here. Not someone who's like, okay, I'm just going to do evil and it doesn't matter, right? Someone who really is trying to overcome their evil impulse. So they were not quick to rebuke him in the sea of desire, to dry it up. Hence the impulse dragged him into its nets, and he fell into its snares at that particular time and instant. At the time that the spirit of the evil impulse kicked him down, but not because of his own desire and will to find his iniquity and to do like this afterwards, right? That's what I've been saying. The beginning of the repentance of this man is regret, to place sorrow into his heart about his sin, to have his soul be afflicted and bitter like wormwood. Number one, he's saying, it's so important to not skip this regret step that we've already talked about, to feel the pain of doing transgression and to really feel that and like bitterness, wormwood, like really feel rotten about it, because that's the stuff that's going to help you. It's going to be your strength on that time when the transgression comes, so you're able to overcome it. If you just make a decision and say, well, I'm just not going to do it anymore, most likely, if you don't really feel the regret, the pain of actually doing it, you're not going to be able to overcome it. And that's what he's saying here. Afterwards, he should increase the fear of sin in his heart every day and put the dread of God into his heart at all times until his heart becomes steady in the trust of God, right? So I know for some this fear of God language is tough, but what he really means is to believe in the magnitude of transgression, that God holds us responsible for the transgressions that we do, and to take it really seriously and to hold in our hearts the fact that there really is a way in which God holds us responsible, and we will pay the price for every transgression that we make. We should make that a reality within our heart that takes contemplation, that takes work, that takes effort to really make sure that we believe that with all our heart and feel that, because then when we get in that situation, we'll immediately feel the effect of it. And that's what he means by increasing the fear of sin in his heart every day. And interestingly enough, this actually creates trust. That's the interesting part. You would usually think, oh, well, something you're in fear of, you end up trusting. That's a very strange thing. What he's saying here, and I think it's really important, is when we actually are in fear of God, usually in the language of the tradition, right? When we respect God, when we respect God's that God holds us responsible for the things that we do, we actually end up trusting God, right? Because then we know, when we believe in our heart, that God's real. If God is real enough to hold against us even our smallest transgression, then God really cares about us. Then God is really there about us, and God really cares for our actions. And that's really sort of how living a life of fear of God, of awe of God, of however you sort of want to define that, of living in God consciousness, and the consciousness of the effects of transgression, or doing a mitzvah, doing a good thing of reward. When we live with that conscious in a very real way, that actually does create trust in God. That deepens our relationship with God. So I think that's a really powerful point he makes here. He continues, as if the impulse comes across him again, like it does from time to time, meaning every one of us has an impulse to do wrong. It's not like we're going to get rid of the Yetzer Hara here. That's going to happen. And so it does come across, and that's not a meaning of whether you've been successful or not, whether you have that impulse. And his desire becomes fanned like the first case. His heart will not be seduced by it, and he will abandon its path. This is as it is stated in Proverbs 28:13, but one who confesses and abandons them will find mercy. It mentions confesses first about the regret and the confession, and afterwards abandons, as leaving the actual transgression. Right, both of these are important here, as he said over and over again. And again, doing this not only increases one's trust in God and enables one to have a closer relationship with God, but also really helps us in order to avoiding sin. And this is, of course, in the case of the person who really does want to leave sin, but is struggling with their evil impulse, their selfish impulse. Tomorrow we'll get into the case of someone who, doesn't necessarily want to leave sin yet. That's kind of a different story.
Well, that's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Daily Derech. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me anytime at rmr@templeofaaron.org. Thank you so much for listening. There are so many people to thank, and you can look in the show notes for that. And also, if you want to know and see any of these texts in the original, we actually have that too. You can actually find that in our episode description. So look in each of the episode descriptions and you'll find that information right there. Thank you very much. Have a great day, everybody.